Welcome back to Have You Heard, the social media podcast by us here at The Social Shepherd. My name is Zoe. I'm one of the co-founders, and today I'm joined by
Jack, the other co-founder.
And Joey, Senior Paid Director.
Fabulous. So today we are going to talk about, obviously we have a lot of conversations. We've got a lot of clients. We're talking to people at all different levels of brand side marketers. And we also speak to a lot of new business leads and stuff. And there's been quite a few common themes coming out in some of those conversations, particularly with senior marketers. So, head of marketing, head of digital, CMOs, for example. And they do ask slightly different questions than we will get asked from, someone who may specialize in paid social or social media management, for example. So we just kind of wanted to have a sit down and share with you guys listening some of the topics that we're talking about and what's kind of commonly being asked from us. So Jack, I think it'd be really good to understand from your perspective, you lead new business, you're having a lot of these conversations. What are the common things that are coming up?
Common things, I guess, depending on the type of person that you're speaking to. I think from a paid perspective, if we dive in there first, especially around paid social, there's the sort of big word at the moment that a lot of people are using as incrementality. And how do we, prove out incremental growth in a change of strategy, a new platform, any geo lifts, anything like that. So incrementality is a big topic at the moment when I'm speaking to paid and performance marketers within the social space.
So before we get into it, just because not everyone listening here is going to be a CMO, we have a lot of entry-level listeners. Can you guys explain incrementality and why that is of interest to people at that level?
So incrementality is really interesting. And I think it's always commonly defined wrong because everyone thinks incrementality is small step changes that push you in a direction. That's not actually what incrementality is. Incrementality is based around causation. So if your ad directly caused someone to purchase something, that is positive incrementality that's being driven there. So it's very different to just little step changes. It's very much looking at things in terms of, did my ad cause that thing to happen? And that's the way and the view that we have to be looking at things. And that's the way that we're then able to drive positive growth for businesses. Because if we know that we're getting positive incrementality from the ads that we're running, or across any of the activity that's being run across multiple channels, then we know that's positive growth that's being driven for the business essentially.
Yeah. So it doesn't just have to be paid, but obviously paid is that place traditionally or a media buying perspective where this sort of sets in. But most recently, Meta released new attribution model, didn't they, Joey?
Yes, they did. Incremental attribution has been out for...
So it's not just us talking about it.
4 weeks now-ish, yeah. I mean, Meta have been rolling it out now for, I think it's the start of April, across ad accounts. And essentially, I think one of the common things with Meta, and one of the things you will always get with marketers, especially when we're speaking to people on brand side, is attribution. And typically, Meta has always been measured on a 7-day click, 1-day view attribution window. People then get very confused when they try and add all of the data that they've got in Meta on that attribution window with all of their last click data in Google Analytics. And obviously it doesn't add up. Meta's obviously over attributing to an extent because it's counting purchases that would have already happened within that 7-day click, 1-day view attribution window. We've always counted it as a very gray window. We don't count that as kind of like our main source of truth for any of the clients that we work with, which is why it's really interesting that the incremental attribution piece has come out from Meta. And essentially what it does is utilizes the same tech behind conversion lift studies, essentially, where you have a holdout group, which determines what the incremental impacts of your ads have been on the audiences that have been hit. So you can actually see whether Meta has driven a purchase, a lead sign up, whatever it might be, directly off the back of your ads. Now, you have to take it with a pinch of salt because it's Meta saying this, and it's Meta saying that this is the way that they've got it set up. But I think it's a really positive change in terms of the way that we're looking at measuring everything that we're doing across paid social, because historically it's always been very gray in terms of the way that we've been able to measure it. And that's led a lot of brands to not really look at in-platform metadata, and actually everything then moves towards last click GA data, which doesn't paint the whole picture. So it complicates things a lot more in terms of looking at your measurability.
And what do we often get a lot of clients ask us about, you're going to hit me for this question, attribution models and, things like Phospha and other tools and stuff that you can use to kind of tap into. We don't necessarily, we have some clients that will utilize that internally and therefore we will tap into that data and stuff like that. But I think from my perspective, and please correct me if you or challenge on this, but those models only really, you have to really buy in to the way that they're going to attribute things. And sort of what would be your kind of guidance to any client in considering an attribution model or tool in that kind of way?
I think it depends on the size of business you are. We've worked with so many different models across lots of different clients. We do have some clients that use tools like Phospha, for example. We also have clients that we work with that use more of an MER-based model where we're looking at blended data and really looking at total impact of the business when we're running ads. So there's different ways that you can look at things. I think generally, if you're in a really rapid scaling business, we would always recommend that you go down the route of looking at things from a blended perspective because it gives you the ultimate amount of flexibility. And typically when you're in that rapid scaling phase, paid media is generally your kind of biggest lever to pull for growth. So all of the changes that the team would be making on your paid media activity, that's going to be having kind of the largest impact on your overall business revenue. So you can almost put two and two together and say, if we've made this change on paid media and we've seen X uplift across the total business, then we can say that that's had the impact there. Obviously, you have to take into consideration, obviously, all of your other channel performance, looking at email marketing, looking at SEO, looking at affiliates, all of that kind of stuff. But you have to make educated decisions around what the impact of that is. And I think what Phospha does as part of that, and typically we would say to get involved with Phospha once you're a slightly larger business and you've kind of moved past that rapid scaling phase, because you've then got so many other channels involved in terms of your total ecosystem that are going to be having parts to play in terms of the bottom line that's being generated. And Phospha's then going to be able to help piece that together a lot more. And I think it's really looking at things in terms of tools like Phospha, for example, are very data driven in terms of the way that that things are, the growth that's being generated, whereas an MER based model generally is more on intuition and hunch in terms of the way that you're seeing the data being generated out of the back end of it, because there's no scientific evidence to say this caused this exactly, but like I said earlier, it's kind of putting two and two together and making assumptions, educated assumptions that's the direction
I think
that
that's
things are
the thing
going.
as well with any tool or any model you're agreeing on internally or any kind of ethos towards attribution. There has to be a high level of almost like paid media common sense applied to it, and you are going to have to look at things in a slightly different way. You're never going to be able to. It's not going to be your true Bible. You're going to need to look at that with a lens of common sense in there.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like looking at an MER based model, it's people need to understand how it works to really get the most out of it and to understand how to work with that model to really scale with it. With something like Phospha, it's a bit more plug and play. And it's a lot easier for anyone to understand, to go in and say, oh, I can see this channel's actually generating this ROAS through Phospha versus this is what it's saying in platform. So I know I need to spend more money through it. So it's a lot easier to understand for anyone to jump in and play with. I think there's definitely a lot more training that is required to get someone to the level to fully understand an MER-based model, because it's all based off intuition more so than data, like heavy data in terms of kind of the way that it's modeled out.
I think it's been an interesting one because we have seen some clients. I think the structure of your team needs to be considered when you're thinking about what tools to use and what attribution model. Because say, for example, you have a team that is built of sort of like middle manager and lower. So you're kind of building from the ground up and you haven't brought those senior people in with that experience to be able to understand all of this. Adding in a complex layer or a complex attribution model, you're not going to get the most out of it because you're not going to be able to apply that level of paid media common sense to it. So I think for anyone listening, kind of leading a marketing team, it's think about the team that you have in place and who is actually going to be managing this, because you're not going to have the time to be in that platform day in, day out. You're going to need to rely on your team making judgment calls based off the back of it.
And so from your side, from an organic perspective, I know one thing that you're sort of beating the drum of is on the organic side is all about your community.
Oh my God, yeah. Like such like an underrated part.
Conversations you're having in terms of, I keep hearing you say sort of your comments are your content. What do you mean by that?
I mean, that is like, that's been coined everywhere at the minute. So I cannot take response. Like that's not mine. That's from elsewhere, and everyone's kind of saying that. But I think one of the things that we find is brands will come to us, and particularly organic social media, that you're quite exposed with that. So what'll end up happening quite a lot, and you'll see this, is someone will get in the call and be like, yeah, our CEO hates our socials, so we just need to like make it better. Like they keep texting me like stuff from our competitors and saying, we need to do stuff like this. And sometimes people really focus, and it does need to focus on, you go on the feed, this is the content you see, it has likes, it has comments on it, and they're like, I'm done type thing. There's a lot of, and I say it's invisible because you can't necessarily see it from the account, but there is some invisible work that can actually have a bigger impact on your brand, or it's not necessarily comparable, but it will extend the work that you're doing on social. And that is things like community outreach. So you're not just focused on the comments that are coming from an inbound perspective, but you're going, okay, we want to be involved in these conversations. So we're going to find people that are posting about this, and we're going to get into the comments, and we're going to leave those witty one-liners on TikTok that we know can get like 25,000 likes on them, for example, maybe even more likes than the content itself. And so I think from a senior perspective, I'm sure it's probably hard, and I've never been in-house, to kind of battle what a board might want to see and then what you know is actually going to work. Because if they're not seeing it, then sometimes seniors within a business can kind of dismiss it. I think that all comes down to reporting as well. Like we're really pushing both Meta and TikTok specifically at the minute to be able to give us, you can't currently get total like count on comments that are on content that's not your content. So you can't actually really easily measure how much engagement you're getting on your outbound and community management. It has to be done manually, which if you're doing a lot of it, which
Impression data would be cool as well. On
yeah,
comments.
exactly. But you can get impression data now on your comments on LinkedIn. I've seen. Has anyone seen that? It's really cool. You don't get that.
I know, yeah. That's what would be amazing to unlock and prove the value of that community management piece.
I mean, would love that, but I'm just asking for comment like count at the minute. If we can get there first, that would be great. But there is a lot of work that we're doing internally as to how we can help those conversations, because I do truly believe, even when we get brands come to us and they're like, we just want social media management and content, and we're going to manage the community in-house through our customer service team. And I'm like, you're just missing out on such a big opportunity. And there's a limit to what a customer service team can do with your inbound social media. They can't really do any of your outbound social media, because you might, we had a client last year who they had partnered with the when the Euros was on. So I'm sorry, I'm not a football girly. The Euros, is it a football
Yeah.
competition?
Yes.
Tournament.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, fine. And so then we went out and we went and found people that were having conversations about this. They weren't mentioning the brand, but the brand was able to insert themselves and then therefore make themselves synonymous with what was happening there. So yeah, I would really, really say that that's a place to invest in. And we're in a really interesting place with social in general at the minute, because I genuinely believe that paid and organic social work best whenever they're hand in hand. The data that you get from organic, and we've seen this, really can help you impact and have a really positive impact, particularly on the creative strategy of your paid social. But a lot of teams treat them separately. And so I think it's actually a really interesting topic to talk about, because we've got some clients who they separate social from search. And so they'll have one agency managing organic social and paid social, and one agency managing organic search and paid search. We've got some clients that split it performance and brand, and they put organic social and brand, and they put paid and performance. If we were to structure a team, what do you guys think? There's going to be pros and cons, and we're not going to set the world straight here, but what do you guys think?
I think performance and brand need to merge much closer than they are. right now, because otherwise you've got a paid team going, we need it to be 100% performance driven, this creative, and the brand are going completely the other way. Things need to come much more in the middle.
Well, again, then it all depends how their KPIs are set as well. Because if you've got a performance team that's purely focused on, like, I don't know, platform ROAS or even last click, for example, they might end up doing some stuff that really positively impacts their ability to meet their KPIs in the short term, but might have a longer term. Like, they might reap the negative consequences of that in the long term because they haven't invested in upper funnel enough. So that's an interesting one. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're in a position now where we've seen quite a large shift over the last year or two around budgets moving away from search platforms into social. I know we've discussed that before. And also the pivot from the need of, well, the pivot towards the need of creative for performance marketing. And you're not going to be able to get the volume of creative that you need unless you've got the research behind trying to get that volume of creative kind of produced. So there was obviously so many other, there's so many channels out there to go and do the research around your creative. Obviously, you've got all of your own internal data pools that you're able to use. So you can look at, what's selling in your Shopify. You can have a look at, obviously, what's performing from your current creative. You can go and do competitor research. But I think the real important thing is because we've had this shift of mentality where social is really kind of becoming the search engine now. There's so much more data that we've got access to in those platforms than we kind of have historically. Google Trends has always kind of been the North Star in terms of that trend data that we've been looking at. But there's so much data to be able to access out there in terms of conversations that are being had through social listening, the search data that you've got across all of the social platforms that's now growing year on year. That's then going to give you really valuable information to then feed into your creative and understand what your creative strategy is going to be off the back end of that. And I think because there's now so much of a need for creative, volume of creative going in, not just volume, but also diversity of creative, you need to have all of those different data points being fed in to understand what direction that you want to take things, because there's just so much need for it at the moment.
Yeah, and I think that's the point where I think everything needs to come closer together, basically, because you've got your traditional paid media marketers who will be very familiar with Google Trends. That just sits within their bucket, basically, but will be less familiar with things like TikTok creator search insights, for example, where you can get access to those search volumes. And TikTok has promised me that search volume data is coming within the next 2 months properly. So that will be really interesting to get. But it's just marrying that stuff together. So do we think, and this is an interesting question because it'll be different for in-house marketers versus agency marketers. Do we think we're ever going to get to a point where your paid team is also your organic team, and maybe like there's a senior person above that manages the strategy of both, and then they have execution focused specialists?
Well, I think that front end research piece spreads across both. I think that's the bit that needs to merge together. Is everyone needs to share all of their data that they've got across everything that they've run so far, across all of the different data points that they've got access to. That all then gets pulled together, and then it kind of gets spread out a little bit in terms of what direction that you want to take things creatively. Is it going to be, organic, or is it going to be a performance paid? Is it going to be a piece of brand creative that you're pushing out there? But that can only be done once that initial research piece is done at the start. And I feel like that's where the teams need and should merge together. But structurally, in terms of how you do that, is always an interesting.
I know. I think as well, it's kind of, we're going through a big process at the minute, trying to teach the team how to even understand at what stage of like, I don't know what the term is for it, almost like industry, how known are they in their industry and how well known is the product, for example? Because if a brand comes to you and it's a brand that has really, really high brand awareness, like people really want the products, then what we need to do is we need to kind of capture that demand. And that's what kind of needs to happen, while still also making sure that we're acquiring new people in that upper funnel piece. But whereas if it's a brand where there isn't that demand there, but there might be product demand, for example, then it's a slightly different thing. And it's kind of teaching the teams to understand what levers to pull and when, because what I think happens way too often is, I don't know, brands maybe set up and say, well, we're going to do this with paid social, we're going to do this with organic social. And that's just what they do for like a 2-year period and it's consistent. Whereas actually, oh, sorry, Mike, there might need to be a readjustment in where you're investing in your strategy on organics to make sure it's better benefiting paid and you're not over reliant on paid, because there is a lot of work that organic social can do now because we've had algorithm changes, for example. So like on organic now, you don't need to have a huge following to be able to get a huge amount of impressions. What you need is a really smart content strategy where you're using all of this data. And then if you use that data also to marry up with your paid. So I'm going off on a tangent here now, but do you see what I mean? Is that it's a complex place that we're in now, and you need people to understand the level of awareness that business and product has to then be able to know how to change it.
Well, it's like we've just pitched for a brand, haven't we? That's an unknown brand and a completely brand new product as well, in a market that doesn't exist. And we're talking around the strategy in terms of how we want to launch this. We're having conversations around what platforms and what channels it is that we want to use, but we very much had the conversation around search, and actually it's not worth running any search because you've got a brand that doesn't really exist that nobody knows about, and you've got a product that doesn't really exist and nobody knows about yet. So until you generate that demand, where the likes of Google comes into play, which is obviously demand and intent-based platform, there's no point running the activity. So you need to put all of your attention into educating and getting the product out there and visible to the users and the market that you want to be able to reach, which then changes your channel strategy in terms of the way that that's activated, because then you're then bringing into play, your meta activity. You're running brand awareness activity to really try and push volume and reach to try and get the word out there of what the brand and product is trying to push. And I think it's trying to educate the team that don't just think, oh, I have to run paid search and I have to run a paid social campaign to be able to do this. Think strategically around where that brand or product is in its life cycle and exactly where the channels are then best suited to kind of help support that.
But I think that also comes into like the structural makeup of the team, because if you have someone that only focuses on paid search, that hasn't been told that it's okay to not always have a solution for everything. Like not every marketing channel is for every single brand or product. And it might be that it's needed now, but it's not needed later, for example. It's done its job and it's a piece in the puzzle. But I think that's something that you kind of need to empower people to feel comfortable in saying, and not feeling like, well, if my channel doesn't have anything to bring here, then I'm irrelevant. And it's like, no, you're not irrelevant. It's just you're actually being a smart marketer and you're being more T-shaped in your approach, which is exactly what we need.
Yeah. Everyone has some degree of bias naturally, but as the people that win are the ones that can reduce that bias to as little as possible. How
do you feel? I hope you don't mind me saying, but a couple of years back, you loved paid search. It was your baby.
Oh, I still do. It's a lot different now from what it used to be. But I mean, it's interesting. You look at like a brand life cycle now, for example, and especially with the way that search is now, that everything is being a lot more AI driven, especially from a keyword perspective and the way that it's being targeted. Historically, you would always have a set of keywords that you would really go out and granularly target, and you would be really specific around those keywords, and then you could build on top of those based on other search intent that you've seen based on research or in terms of your search query reports that you're doing. You would then slowly build out your keyword list as part of that. It's very different now because Google does a lot of that heavy lifting for you. So actually your headroom now in terms of scalability within Google isn't just, I need to add some keywords in, because actually, yes, adding some new keywords in is going to give you a little bit of incremental reach. But on the grand scheme of things, Google's engine is pretty good at finding all of the searches that it knows are relevant for you. And it's only going to keep getting better and better. And yes, there's still irrelevant stuff that comes through which means you still need to do your SQRs to do all of your negative keywords. But I think the future of search now is very much not around what keywords is it that I want to target. It's actually moving the focus towards efficiencies from your negative keywords and making sure that you're cutting out anything that's not irrelevant that Google is matching to, but then actually understanding your bidding strategies and using it as a scaling model. And then you're always going to reach a point where you're going to cap off, because there's only so much demand out there that you can capture that's going to be cost efficient for you as a brand. But then it's understanding where that cap is to then move your attention elsewhere.
Or also investing in your generation channels, for example. So do you know what I mean? That like there's a knowing at what point to, and social can be one of those generation channels.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's you will hit that point. Every brand will hit that point eventually where you've capped out on cost efficient growth and scalability within Google, and that's when you need to look to move further up the funnel, whether that's within Google channels itself with demand generation, YouTube, or whether that's moving to other channels, Meta, TikTok, Pinterest, Reddit, Snapchat, etc., and really kind of push the scalability from that perspective. But again, just like jumping back to your point around, people that are siloed in terms of working in individual channels, someone that works in Google is never going to know almost what that point is, and to be able to bring in other channels. So I think it's really important to make sure that the team that you're working with do have a really good diverse knowledge of the actual whole ecosystem in terms of how it all pieces together, because you're just going to end up capping yourself out otherwise.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the other things that, and you guys, we talk about this all the time, that we keep getting asked from senior marketers is how we're integrating AI into the business and what does that kind of look like. And it's a really interesting one, because we actually have quite a few clients that have come to us and been like, oh, our business isn't embracing AI, but we know we need to as marketers. So can we get the tools through you? Can we do it this way? Can you guys lead us through it and stuff? So it's really interesting. And they're probably, that we have some clients who are literally embedding AI into every single second of their day and every single piece of software that they have and process, but then some that are very averse. So I guess if we were kind of a CMO or we were in a brand, and to be honest, it's probably similar to what we're working on at the minute inside the agency, but where would our focus be in terms of starting to embed AI?
In social specifically?
Yeah, social social paid and organic, I would say, and influencer.
But I think from influence and then paid social side, more so from the research ideation perspective. So from a paid creative perspective, there are tools out there already that you can feed in all of your your product feed, your product catalog, websites, product imagery, etc., reviews, Reddit, link in your ad account as well, and it can feed all of that data to create sort of competitor clones, new concepts based on reviews, your product description, what people are talking about you. And then you can do top performing creative iterations as well. So there are tools that are constantly bringing you new concepts for paid creative every day into your inbox effectively. So I think from that ideation perspective, that's where it's really accelerating.
Would you say that's ideation though, or execution?
It is execution as well, but the execution arguably isn't quite there yet. So what we're looking to do is take all of those learnings, all of those ideas, and all of the things that it's executed on, bringing it to a designer and going, here's the concept that we believe will work, because our sort of AI agent is working in the background to bring us this, bring it into a designer. That ideation process is just sped up massively, and it gives the designer the creative route just to create that right now. I think obviously in time it will get better. Have less reliance on a designer. Then an influence perspective, it's more so on the actual looking, it could go through that influencer's account all the way back from
do
zero,
an audit for it, trained on what you're trying to do. Yeah.
It could look elsewhere outside of social? What have been the mentions about that influencer on Reddit or other channels? And is there any negative sentiment about that influencer? To what degree? To what is that negative sentiment about?
I think it's really interesting on the influencer point, actually, because historically, like the way that you would pick an influencer is you would plug them into a tool and you would look at their following and their engagement rate. And that's obviously, as long as they were kind of relevant enough for the brand, that you would kind of put 2 and 2 together and say that's a good fit for what we're looking for. But actually introducing AI into the equation really allows you to go a lot more granular and review influencers, all of their video content, like you said, all of the sentiment that's being spoken around them, and it introduces so many more metrics into the equation in that decision-making process of like which influencer is actually going to be the best fit for you as a business. And I think that's that's probably a piece that's going to develop over time. I don't know whether there's any tools out there that do it at the moment.
Yeah, you can do bits of it at the minute. I mean, I think really what we're kind of saying is that the opportunity now is for efficiencies within your team. So like, whereas our team would have had to probably, spend a good couple of hours properly researching an influencer, delving through their accounts, even delving through their partners' accounts if they have one, looking at, doing manual pulls or looking at social listening dashboards. There's so many different places that you'd have to look at. And now you can get all of that information kind of given to you in a report from AI, so you can spend the time looking at that. So really the opportunity at this point in time is more so about efficiencies and helping people kind of get there quicker. I think another interesting AI related topic is, we're not actually getting anyone ask us about it, but I feel like we will in the future. It's more about like predictive AI and how people can use AI to understand if I spend more on this channel, but what return will I get back from that?
I agree. I mean, there's a huge, large agencies have data analysts, data scientists, and I do worry that, the predictive analytics piece that AIs will be doing is going to take that role out for them in a way.
But does it take the role out, or does it just change the role? I think it changes
change
the role.
Yes, of course, change the role.
Do you mean
as well.
like forecasting become a heck of a lot easier? Do you know what I mean? Because you can ask a piece of AI to do, and you can train it in the way that you guys you've done it before and stuff like that. And I think that's the benefit from it. Again, I don't know if it necessarily wipes out a data analyst. I think it probably means that data analyst needs to become more strategic and more critical in the way that they're looking at things, and slightly more creative in their approach. For example, 100% AI is going to completely shape a lot of the roles that we have in relation to data specifically. But at this point in time, efficiencies, and I think it's a good place for people to start looking at it, even from an operational POV. Like, we find it so much easier recently having AI note takers in meetings, for example. So we can cut someone out of a meeting, for example, and they can focus on something else while the team's doing, like, someone doesn't need to be there to take minutes. There's so many opportunities just for efficiencies at this point in time. Is there anything else that you guys have heard from clients at the minute that you'd like to set the record straight on or share? No? Wow, that's good, because you've got a meeting in 3 minutes that you need to go to, okay?
That's why I said no. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining, and thank you to everyone for listening, watching, however you consume this. If there's anything you'd like us to cover, please feel free to drop us a comment or a DM, and we'll make sure to get to it. But thank you so much for listening.